Welcome, everybody, to the 30th episode of Comic DNA, on which we will be discussing CreatureTech by Doug TenNaple, first published by Top Shelf in 2002. I am Aaron Walther, and with me today are two wonderful returning guests. First, we have Mr. Gabriel Dunston, creator of his self-published series Purgatory Pub.
Hi.
Thank you, Gabe, for being here. And second, we have Mr. Ed Bickford, creator of his self-published series Robot Pulp.
Hola!
Ed, thank you also for being here. So, we are here to talk about CreatureTech by Doug TenNaple. And for anybody who's listening, you might recognize Doug TenNaple, maybe not his name, but you definitely recognize one of his creations from the 90s, which would be the character of Earthworm Jim, which is famous for the video game and the follow-up cartoon series and toy line and what have you. Doug TenNaple worked in the animation industry and then transitioned into the video game industry throughout most of the 90s. And in the early 2000s, TenNaple began writing and drawing graphic novels. And he was really pumping them out for a while, doing nearly a book every year. And since doing CreatureTech in 2002, he's put out 12 other graphic novels. So, before we start talking about CreatureTech, I just want to know, to you, Ed and Gabe, how much TenNaple have you guys read? Ed, you first.
I've read Iron's West,
Mm-hmm.
and I also read his online comic, Rat Fist.
Yes, okay.
And I don't know if I have anything else I read, but maybe if I saw it online, because I followed him, I used to follow his website quite a bit, because I used to oogle his art when I was a young lad, I guess. 2002, I was in my 30s, so I was younger.
Younger.
So I would follow his all his posts and just oogle his art and stuff and watch his I think he had YouTube videos too back then where he would ink stuff with a toothbrush, kind of like Jim Mahfood.
Yeah.
Gabe, what TenNaple books have you read?
Well, this is something you and I've discussed. I've kind of got the you've read the first half, and I've read the second half of his books.
Yeah, correct.
Our overlap is CreatureTech and Tommysaurus.
Mm-hmm.
But my first book that I read it as soon as it came out was Power Up. Right up my alley. It made him a name for me, and I've since discovered. I don't know. There's speaking as both an artist and a writer, I think there's a certain kind of genius behind his comics and the way he handles his ethos.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, but to your question, Tommysaurus Rex, Power Up, Ghostopolis, Cardboard, and CreatureTech. CreatureTech was kind of the big seminal book for him for several years, and he's recently said that Cardboard is the book that he's the most proud of at this exact moment. Yeah,
I need to read Cardboard. As you mentioned, Gabe, I have read maybe his first 7 or 8 books. Like I said, he was putting out a book a year in the 2000s, starting with CreatureTech, which I read.
Something that I aspire towards.
Yeah, I'm so impressed by his output. And I mean, the books are of varying length. Some of them, are pretty short, and some of them are a little longer. But still, there's an impressive output that he's put out, over the last. I mean, now we're looking at nearly 15 years, but still, I mean.
Well, he still does, because, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's
but he still did on Rat Fist. I mean, he put out stuff ridiculously fast on Rat Fist.
Yeah, he was doing a page a day. When
and now I think I don't know what he's doing now, but I know he's working on VeggieTales now, right?
Yes, I saw that.
So he might not be doing books right now.
Showrunner.
Yeah,
He's not doing books right now. He's the showrunner for VeggieTales in the House, which is put on by DreamWorks right now. So he got some writers that he knows, including Ethan Nicole, sit down to write out the show. They did some character redesigns. So he's been doing that instead of comics. And he's been one of the most disheartening things that has happened in my comics career is I pointed to him when I told my parents I wanted to make comics for a living. So I'm going to make comics like this guy. He puts out a book a year. He's doing fine. And I find out later, no, he's not doing fine. He's actually kind of in trouble, and he's been pitching things to DreamWorks for years.
Yeah,
and he's just dying to get. And what's funny is like there's this beautiful podcast episode where he's being interviewed by somebody who works at DreamWorks, and he says everyone at DreamWorks wants to be TenNapel, and TenNapel wanted to be anyone in DreamWorks.
Yeah.
He's like, do you understand? You have regular paycheck every month. That's amazing. You have benefits.
Yeah, that's like the double-edged sword that is making comic books in the comic book industry, especially when you're doing quote-unquote indie stuff, even if you're putting out stuff through Image Comics.
Yeah, the saddest part about the comic industry that I've discovered is if you're the one who actually makes the freaking comics, you are the butthole of the industry, and nobody wants to deal with you.
Mm-hmm. It's weird. It's weird.
It is. Oh, I stand corrected because I think Doug posted something I think like last week or the week before about another pitch shot down.
Oh, really?
And there was people commenting on Facebook, and I told him, I was like, you should just self-publish. And he put under a like, and he goes, I like the way you think. And it's not like he's Ed Bickford. He doesn't have to worry about. He's Doug TenNaple. He has a name, so he can just publish and then just
They just recently, a few years ago, I think they did a successful Kickstarter for the follow-up video game that he and the other guys that worked on the Neverhood.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's you're talking about Armacrog, which I absolutely backed. That thing almost didn't make it.
I know, it was close. I was watching it. I have to admit, I hate being a bad guy, but I did not back it. Not for any specific reason. I thought it looked great. I don't have a lot of money to back things at the moment.
Yeah. What happened with that campaign? It's he's the lead creative guy behind it, but his buddies made this game company, Pencil Test Studios, and these are his buddies from when he did Earthworm Jim and he did some animation. So these are really talented guys who know how to execute, but not necessarily ideate. So they're like, give us, we want an idea that we can work on together, something we can develop, and they were asking for. Cripes. There we go. They asked for $900,000, and on the last day, they had only $100,000.
Oh,
they went from $100,000 to $974 in the very last, in the last hours. Yeah. Well, I personally donated just $10 to get my hands on the game whenever it comes out, just so that I could say I'm not the reason this didn't fund. Yeah. And apparently so did the rest of the internet.
Well, I always wonder about things like that, like how many ghost backers they have, kind of like ready to put money into it, but they want to see how much they can get out of the public first. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's a lot of from experience. There's a lot of angel backers on Kickstarter.
Yeah, exactly.
People who will drop a couple $100 and say, no, I don't actually want any of your tiers. I just want to make sure your thing gets made. And there's some people who will drop $10,000.
Oof.
But they'll say, oh, you've got enough to make your goal without my $10,000, and then they'll withdraw.
Yeah. Yeah, Kickstarter is a weird thing. But
it's a strange beast.
But anyway, we're not really here to talk about Kickstarter. We are here today to talk about CreatureTech. So, I think I am going to go ahead and, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the book, I'll give a slight plot synopsis of what this book is about. So here goes.
Please do, and good luck.
Yes. CreatureTech is the story about a young hotshot scientist named Michael Ong. He is given a government job as the head of the Research Technical Institute, nicknamed CreatureTech, which is basically where the government stores all of the scientific oddities and artifacts it has collected over the years. And Michael's job is to study and categorize every item. When they discover the Shroud of Turrin, which is the supposed burial cloth of Jesus Christ, they discover that it is real, and the cloth has the ability to heal people and even raise the dead. The cloth is then stolen by a ghost who uses it to bring his body back to life so that he can continue with his century-old plan of taking over the world with giant space eels. And if you can't tell from that description, this comic gets a little crazy in some places.
Yep.
Yes.
Dun dun dun.
So,
the real challenge of this discussion is going to be talking about this book specifically, as opposed to the body of work behind it, because so much of one is reminiscent of the other.
Yeah, and I think that's true, and I think that's why it's good to talk about CreatureTech, because I think CreatureTech, it sort of represents everything that TenNapel, I think, wants to talk about in all of his stories.
Yeah.
Like, it is sort of like a summation. I mean, all of his other books are either reflections of this or shades of this. Not necessarily entirely like this book, but they, you can see the connection to this book. But I think CreatureTech sort of encompasses the totality of what Doug TenNaple is all about.
Yeah, this book is like he describes it himself in the back of my image version. It's kind of it's like a stew where it's just every ingredient I've ever wanted to eat. Let me go ahead and put it in one place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you end up with this book. You've got all of his ethos in various different factions, like the father-son story. You've got your villain story. You've got your very blatant Jesus allegory. You've got the love story, and my personal favorite, you've got the 6'6" mantis alien insect thing.
Blue.
Yes.
Blue
the mantis,
which I freaking love.
Easily one of the best characters in the book.
His B-plot is my favorite part of this book.
What's that now?
The B-plot following the mantid is my favorite part of this book.
Absolutely. I actually wish there was more of that in the book. I like CreatureTech a lot. I can't remember if I said so earlier on the podcast, but I read this when it first came out, and I've read it a few times since, but it's been many years probably since I've read it. So I was really, really curious to reread it for the podcast and kind of see how I still felt, or if I felt the same way about the book. And I mean, I'm still a fan of TenNapel. Like I said, I've read about half dozen of his books. I was reading every book as they came out up until about 2007, when I kind of had to stop buying comics. As I mentioned yesterday, Gabe, when we were talking, that coincidentally is the same year that I decided I wanted to start producing comics, which meant I no longer had the disposable income to buy comics.
Yep,
Yes.
I ran into the exact same situation,
Right.
which is why now I'm either buying them at a used bookstore for half the cover price, or I'm at a Comic-Con trading with other creators.
Right, exactly. So,
which I used to think was a terrible practice. Screw you people, I need the money.
Mm-hmm.
And now I realize, this is the only way me and these other people get to read any comics. Yes, hell yes, I'll trade with you. Let's do it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's basically the way I get most of my comics nowadays. I was we were at Heroes Con just the other week, Gabe, and I was talking to just some dude not behind the table. Like, I was out on the floor, waiting in line to meet another artist, somebody who is much more professional and successful than I am. And I was talking to the guy in line next to me, and he was like, we were talking about comics, and he's like, so what are you reading now? And I was sort of like, I don't really know any, hot new books that are out right now, because I don't read that many new books. Most of the stuff that I read is, indie books from guys that I've met at shows and I've traded books with. That's pretty much all I'm reading. Other than a few, old archive stuff, or my bookshelf is pretty huge, and I like to go through it every now and then. But yeah, it was really weird, because I had this moment where I was like, I can't even be a fan anymore. I can't even talk about whatever's popular. It was odd. I'm at a comic book convention, and I felt like an outsider. It was strange.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, man. It happened to me too.
Which, by the way, this just a little proclamation, if you will. Anybody who's listening to this podcast and you also are making comic books, and if you're ever at a show And if I'm ever at the show, no matter what is going on, if you are self-publishing comic books and you got a table at the show, or even if you don't have a table, if you just got your book, I will trade my books, any of my books, for anything. Like, as long as it's not like a joke, like on me. Like, as long as, well, you know, that's not even true. Like, if you made a comic just all about how stupid I am, I would still trade for it.
Oh, Ed, you heard that, man. He just threw the gauntlet.
You ruined the surprise.
Yeah, that was going to be Ed's present to me the next time we were at a show together.
There goes my big promo. Thanks a lot, dude.
Aaron, always being a jerk, whether he knows it or not.
Yeah. I can't help it. So
you just don't.
I just don't.
Jerk.
I choose not to. So, yeah. So, CreatureTech. I'll just go ahead and say, like I said, I haven't read it for a few years, and I reread it again, and I still like it, but I probably don't like it as much as some of his other books.
Mm-hmm.
But I do still have like an appreciation for what CreatureTech does, and for like what, as I said, just the way it sort of like encompasses all of TenNapel. Like it is like pure TenNapel, this book.
Yeah,
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
I read an interview one time where he said that he wants his characters to rise above what they're rise above what their normal character is, to go above and beyond, to be better, a better person, or to just rise above whatever difficulties they're facing.
Yeah.
And I think, I could see that.
Well, that's definitely like this book.
In subsequent books, like that spreads to villains. Like the villains, either we're given some pathos behind each villain, or the villains have redemptive moments.
Well, if you ever read Iron's West, the hero is he's a slime ball. He's a swindler.
Yeah.
And he keeps swindling this lady at the bar, I think it is, and eventually in the end he's like, spoilers. Eventually in the end he had what he wanted. He finally got what he wanted, and he's riding at a town, and that train monster shows up, and he's sitting there and it just eats at him. He's like, I got to go back and fight this thing even if I can't win.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, that's pretty good. This one, I don't know if it's just because it's a different time in my life. I mean, the artwork was great, the storytelling's good, but I was like, I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Even though, and it's a Doug book too, and I was like, man. But I would love to see a spin-off of just Blue and the Rednecks doing stuff. I would read that.
Oh man. Yes.
I would read that all day long,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I would watch that animated series.
Yes.
Absolutely. Like I said, I really wish when I got done reading the book the second time, or not the second time, but the most recent time, I kind of really wished that. I mean, it's a lengthy book. Like it's it doesn't have page numbers, so I don't actually know how many pages it is. But I mean, it's a good-sized book, and I really wish that there were just more about the not necessarily less about Michael and like the story of Michael and his faith, which is essentially what the book is about. But
hold on, I'm sorry. Please finish your thought.
Yes, I just wish there was more of like Blue and more stuff with like the Technical Institute and like the locals, and just kind of like, honestly, I mean, this is good. I enjoyed the world of CreatureTech a lot, and I would like to just see more of it. So I guess the old saying of always leave them wanting more applies.
Yeah. There's a lot of colorful characters, and we don't get any depth on any of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I really would have liked to have seen more.
Before we go on, gentlemen, let's address the elephant in the room. This book, just like every other book, is big, honking, not very, very transparent Christian allegory.
Yes. Yeah, that is a good point. A good thing to point out.
I am surprised and impressed we made it this far without talking some Jesus.
Right, because I mean the book is about Jesus.
He finds the legitimate Shroud of Turrin.
Right.
Like that's the inciting incident of the whole freaking thing.
Mm-hmm.
So just all of his books are some allegorical facet of Christianity.
Yes. I guess that kind of it's weird to say, but that is one of the interesting things about TenNapel, is that he is almost, you could say, unapologetically Christian in his works. And he's very upfront about the fact that all of his books are about his Christian values. And
very specifically Protestant and I think evangelical values. I'm not. It's very, very vague which end of Protestantism he is, but it's very specifically the Protestant Christian views.
Yes, in the book there's the scene where he goes to the church picnic, and there's a banner that says Church of the Nazarene.
Oh yeah.
I'm not sure if Doug is a part of the Church of the Nazarene, but I knew somebody who was. And
lay it out, man. I didn't know that was a denomination.
That is, it's a small denomination. Much smaller than like your typical Baptist or Lutheran or like Methodist. Church of the Nazarene is a much smaller, but still Protestant, as I understand it. But this book, I would say that
lay out some Nazarene on it.
I gotta be honest, I don't know a whole lot about Nazarene, but
you tease me with nuggets of knowledge and then you don't deliver.
I know.
What is this? Okay, so in CreatureTech, we've got the father-son relationship, which is something that TenNapel just loves. That's kind of his meat.
Yeah. Well, I think it was
an evil character with the hand of a legitimate demon. We've got a nod towards science versus religion as a red herring. We've got the actual Shroud of Turrin. There's an alien which this is a beautiful science fiction concept. I know it's not original by any stretch, but I still think it's badass. The concept of an alien that it's the only thing keeping him alive. Like it wounds him by literally ripping out his heart.
Yes.
Our main character, he finds an alien that it's a parasite. It rips out his heart and then immediately latches onto him and acts as his heart. Kind of like an alien, the face hugger will latch onto your face, but then do your breathing for you. This creature pumps his heart for him. And also gives him 2 extra appendages.
In that respect, it's really more of a symbiote than a parasite.
Yeah. It's a creature that simultaneously makes you significantly more vulnerable while also making you significantly more formidable.
Yes.
Kind of like in Batman, the original, like Bane. The thing that makes him so unstoppable is literally the same stuff that's killing him. And just that's. That's interesting on a deep level, but you find out that this particular alien race also has their own exact Christ-like figure who dies not on a cross but on a wooden rectangle.
Yes,
and I think the concept, what he's trying to do is just reframe all of the universal Christian themes, just the themes that are in all of the Christian denominations, and trying to repackage them in a way that makes more sense to a secular society. Yes. And it's very, very difficult because Christianity is such. When you look at all morality tales in the great pantheon of human history, Christianity is exceptionally weird. Like, you think Beowulf, that's something that everybody gets. This is a conquering hero who fights for his people and wins. And you get the Alamo. And you get these great heroes who fight for their people and die heroically.
Like Vikings.
Like Vikings.
Valhalla.
And then you get Christianity where he's like, no, you don't fight. And the reaction of all the people is like, so what? If we don't fight, what do we do? And Jesus says, well, you take your licks, you keep doing what you're doing anyway, and then you take some more licks, and eventually they kill you. It's like, what? It's like, yeah, kind of the ultimate goal here is to anger everyone else so much with your piety, and you're taking them to task, and your peaceful behavior, that eventually they kill you. And because you are so peaceful, that process is very, very easy. And so the conquering heroes of this Christian ideal, the legitimately Christ-like people we have in history are much less interesting, much less glamorous. Like, especially here living in the United States, we've all grown up with Christianity's motherfucking everywhere. Just it permeates the window dressing of Christianity permeates every single part of our culture. However, we still don't understand the Christ-like figure as being a hero because we understand George Washington, the conquering hero. We understand conquering heroes, and the actual Christ-like figures we'll respect, but we still don't get. People like Martin Luther King, people like Nelson Mandela, like Mother Teresa to a small extent, like Gandhi. Say it again?
I said he wasn't Christian, though.
No, but the idea of, wait, which one wasn't? I know Gandhi was not.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but
the idea of like
figure.
a passive
and
resistance.
the idea of passive resistance came from, like, his mentors were people like Tolstoy, who were deeply Christian and came up with, like, here is how you resist passively, and literally wrote the book on it, to which Gandhi was like, oh yeah, that's brilliant, I'm going to do that. So despite not being Christian, can still serve as a Christ-like figure. For instance, the freaking, I think that's one of the ideas, the dead alien who dies on a wooden rectangle, nailed to a wooden rectangle, wouldn't be Christian either, but serves as that symbol to humanity. So I think that's kind of the challenge of his book, is to tell that story that even our society still doesn't quite get in a way that we would. Like, that's the challenge.
I think there's more than one. I think that each story has a Christ-like story to it.
Every single one of his, yes.
Well, I mean, like you get the story with Blue, and you got the Dr. Ong and the alien symbiotic relationship, and then also you got Dr. Ong and his father's relationship as well.
Right.
And then I think because they always call God the Father, right? And I think that he goes to his dad always wanted him to be a pastor, right?
Yes.
Or was it
his dad?
And then he says
his father was a physicist of some note for a while,
right? And I know, but his dad now he wants him to be a pastor or whatever, and so he's like, no, I'm going to be a rock star scientist. And then by the end, he actually does what his father wanted, and which is kind of like what God wants you to do, kind of stuff too,
Kind of. It's also the C.S. Lewis story. It's like fight against this thing, and then eventually submit to the thing. It's like a submission to your ultimate identity.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the similarities to C.S. Lewis. Thematically.
Also,
go ahead.
Very briefly, just as a work of literature, doesn't that little bit at the end seem kind of tacked on and shitty?
Which bit are you talking about?
Just he has he has a spiritual conversion.
Are you talking about like the very last 2 pages or 3 pages where
just the fact that our hero just decides to be a pastor at all?
I was gonna say I'm like on a reread of CreatureTech, I'm not a super fan of that prologue or epilogue. I'm sorry, I'm not a big fan of that epilogue.
I'm not a big fan that he didn't take the girl. You can still be a pastor and still marry the girl,
Yeah.
I'm almost positive that's what he does.
Well, but there's no implication either way. Like
he just throws that water in her face and heals her for all the times that, he said him and his friends used to pick on her so much that she even tried to commit suicide.
I tell you what, man, that whole section of the book just kind of irks me a little bit. For the record, I think it's implied that they do end up together. I mean, he takes her on a date, they have a good time, he heals her at the end, which I also think is kind of tacked on and shitty.
Yeah, I thought it would have been better if he would just he would have just left that part out and actually showed them, maybe at the altar or whatever, and kept her the way she was,
Yes, like I feel like very tacitly. Here's the rock in the hard place. I feel very tacitly that it's like he's not allowed to be with her until she is her withered hand and her milky eye are taken away, and she suddenly kind of like in all those teen movies back in the 90s and early 2000s. It's like, oh, she's the crazy, weird, artsy chick, but when she has her hair down and it's not in a ponytail and take away the glasses, suddenly she's beautiful.
Right. I don't know. I'm not. I don't know if I buy that entirely.
Yes.
Because there.
Now, at the same time, yeah. I'm sorry. Go on.
I was just gonna say I don't know if I buy that entirely because like as Dr. Ong as a Christ-like figure, like he was sacrificing in that scene. The whole point is he had a little bit of the Shroud of Turrin. As we said in the introduction, the Shroud of Turrin can heal people. And the book ends, what we're talking about now at the ending, is that they've used up the Shroud of Turrin throughout the adventures of the book, and they just have a little bit left. And he can use it to heal himself, to remove this parasite/symbiote from himself. And
I didn't get that.
No, that's what's going on there.
Yeah, I got it.
So instead of healing himself, he admittedly playfully, and not like if you were thinking it out, like I've got the rarest substance on Earth, so let me just fill a water balloon full of it and chuck it across a prairie at some girl. You know, not the best way. You know, like I guess he's got impeccable aim because of the parasite now, but you know, he sacrifices instead of using it on himself, he uses it on the girl to basically give her what she's always wanted. So that's still falling in line with the Christ-like figure that he is. He's sacrificing his own well-being for her, except that it's not really sacrificing his well-being because by having the parasite, he's basically a superhero. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah, so it's kind of cancels out if you ask me.
Yeah, exactly.
The real conceit is that if you live in a world where the Shroud of Turrin is a real thing, then what excuse do you have for not healing the girl?
Yeah.
Just why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of either she's not healed and the writer is a dick, or she is healed and it's just kind of like, why was that even necessary in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's douches like me make that a no-win scenario because I'm going to be critical one way or the other because I'm a douche.
Right.
Oh, to go back to the... was it a symbiote? Is that what it's called?
I think they do say it's a or I think it is called a symbiote at some point because it's not killing him. It just needs him to live. So they form a symbiotic relationship.
It chooses him.
Yeah, it chooses him. That is a big point.
The climax is when the symbiote is on the villain, making the villain stronger. Excuse me, and our hero stabs himself in the heart. Mm-hmm. On faith that the symbiote just likes him better.
Yes.
And it does.
Again.
And the symbiote's willing to kill the villain and save this guy.
Again, the Christian themes of faith. Like, Michael has to completely give himself over to faith. Like, it's basically, he's just guessing. He's just assuming that this symbiote likes him more than the bad guy. And he takes it on faith.
Yeah, the illustration of the concept is not... will you be there to catch me if I jump? The concept is, I am jumping, and
you're going to be there.
And I mean, the second half of the equation is not spoken. It's just, I'm jumping. You can either fix it or you can't.
Right.
And like speaking from, I don't know, from kind of like the preachy standpoint. So much of Sunday school, so much of religious allegories are the concept of you need to give up and submit. And something that we don't talk about enough is the alien's perspective. Here is somebody who can only be helped by you. And you have to because there is no one else. Like, that's something that happens to people all the time. Like, that's a huge, huge ethic in Christianity. When you run into a position where you can help, you'd better because you're there. You know what I mean?
I was trying to go to a different point. we got off topic. I thought was really cool. It was in the graveyard when he gets knocked unconscious. The thing takes over and drags him away and saves him. I thought that was pretty awesome. I remember I saw that before I even read the book. I think I must have I was like, I don't know where I saw. I must have read like a preview or something online. And I always thought, I was like, man, that is an awesome concept to have an alien that's attached to you. You're fighting, you get knocked out. And rather than get your brains bashed in more, the alien takes over and runs and saves your ass, you know? And I thought that was so cool.
That is pretty sweet.
Again, that's the whole, like, going with the theme of humility and faith, of completely giving yourself up to a higher power, and that's basically like Dr. Ong, like he cannot survive without this thing in his life, the alien,
Right.
and he
Right.
he basically trusts it to just take care of him, or he learns that he has to trust it to take care of him, and that's one of the scenes where he learns that it will look out for him even when he's not conscious.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been talking a lot about the Christian themes throughout this book, and I want to
The
talk.
elephant in the room.
Yeah, the elephant in the room, and we're going to keep talking about it because, frankly, there's no other way to talk about Doug TenNaple.
Nope.
And so one of the things I think we should kind of talk about is, despite the fact that I would say that all of TenNaple's books fall completely in line with his Christian value system, you could say. CreatureTech is one of his most blatantly on the surface about Christianity books, and despite that, I think you can still enjoy the book like purely on an entertainment level.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Dude writes himself some adventure stories.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and I again, Gabe, I had mentioned this the other day when we were talking, but it was very interesting. I had met somebody once who was talking about Doug TenNaple, and they didn't know me. They didn't know that I knew TenNaple, and they just brought up TenNaple, and they were like, "Oh, I love Doug TenNaple. He's such a great artist, and his books are all really great." And then there was kind of this moment. There's this like pause where they were like, "He is a Christian, but there's still really good stuff." Like,
Yeah.
and it's just like I knew what they meant. Like I knew what they meant, but it was still kind of this whole like, it's tough to like write about your like the Christian themes and the Christian value system without being pigeonholed into like a Christian entertainer. It's
Oh yeah. Now
Right.
the thing that you and I mentioned is like stuff that was up until recently, things that were labeled as blatantly "this is for a Christian audience"
exactly.
are shitty.
They're terrible.
Like on an
yes.
objective level, they are awful. The anime, like if it's an animated anything, it's terrible. If it's anything with acting, all of the acting is awful.
Yeah.
Everything's been made on the cheap. So like in terms of the problem is what happened is that's become synonymous with just anything that's got a Christian bent is also terrible for ideological reasons.
Right.
Which is sad because, you know, speaking from a secular perspective, as far as myth stories goes, the Christian mythos is crazy. It's bananas town.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's lots and lots of myth stories contain self-sacrifice, but nothing to the umpteenth layer that Christianity does. Nothing else in any of the myth that I've been reading, and I'm big fat way into mythic stuff kind of guy.
Right.
I'm not talking though.
It's also very hard to differentiate like the like Christian theology versus the way Christianity can be used politically. I guess is just the way I'll just throw that out there.
Yeah.
You know.
No, you're absolutely right. That's also kind of throwing some ink in the water in terms of just being able to enjoy something on its own merits.
Mm-hmm. Because
it's impossible to remove from context.
Yeah, because
and
like
the context in which it's used.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I mean, if you want to like talk about Jesus' teachings, like I always kind of go back to one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, Monty Python's Life of Brian. And
that's your favorite?
That's
really
one of, and I will fucking fist fight you over that because that movie is
I'll
genius.
take you, sir.
Oh, you don't want.
You've got the reach, but I've got the weight advantage.
You do.
That movie is awful.
I've been put. Whoa! No. You okay?
I said it.
We're not going. We're not
I'm
going down
not
that road.
Say it again.
We're not going down that road. I'm just gonna say one of the things I always appreciated when they were promoting that film, and I stand by this. I think they did a good job of this. They said when they were trying to write that film, they couldn't make too many jokes about Jesus or his teachings because there's nothing wrong with his teachings, like his basic teachings of peace and turn the other cheek, and do unto others as they would do unto you. There's absolutely like you can't make fun of that because that's like wholesome and good. But what they wanted to make fun of.
How do you pick on a guy whose entire life is trying to tell everyone how to get along?
Exactly.
And then he dies for that idea.
Exactly. Yeah. They said that there's no comedy in that because it's not funny.
Nope.
What's funny is making fun of the institutions and the fanatic followers who argue and bicker and reinterpret those teachings to suit their own whims. That
you mean like today?
I think you're correct. I think you're exactly right, and I think that they had a good goal, but I think they missed hard.
I mean, you are so wrong.
They made a movie.
You are so wrong, and we will save that for another podcast.
The scene where they're going to stone a guy for using the word Jehovah.
Yes.
Boring as shit.
Oh, you are so wrong. Oh my God, I can't believe we're even having this conversation.
The problem is that there's just not a whole lot of joke there to mine.
I don't know, Gabe. I mean, I think
I just made his head explode.
I thought I knew, but I guess I didn't.
This is the last episode Gabe will be on.
Right. Gabe's been excommunicated from Comic DNA. But anyway, to kind of bring this back to what we were talking about TenNapel and CreatureTech, is I do think that TenNapel does a great job of giving, like as you said, Gabe, he's making stories from his Christian philosophy for a secular audience, and go ahead. Yes.
Making a story that can stand on its own as like a story that has its own merit.
Yes, exactly. I mean, at their heart, I think all of his stories, and CreatureTech definitely fits into this. There's stories about morality. The concept of there's a good and there's evil, which again, it all falls under the umbrella of Christian philosophy. Good and evil. The giving yourself up, like humility. Giving yourself up, admitting that you cannot know everything, and that you have to just take things on faith. Like you have to be able to give yourself up to a higher power, as the drunks do. I'm sorry, that might be kind of offensive.
As they say in AA.
As they say in AA. And that's all stuff that's present in his books.
Yeah, they're all morality tales that are specifically Christian. I tell you what, though, this book stands out as an anomaly from his others. Like kind of a Christian ideal is that there is good and there is evil. Mm-hmm. However, the amount of evil that's actually in the world, depending on which clergy person you speak to,
right.
It is very, very small.
Yes.
The concept of love your enemy is huge, because in almost every one of his books, the bad guy character is a broken thing. Mm-hmm. It's someone who's been through something terrible and they're suffering. Kind of like the analogy I use is like an injured dog.
Yes.
An injured dog, which is otherwise an injured dog will bite you. An injured dog will fight you. An injured dog will not do anything you want it to do. But that same animal, when it's in good health, will be the sweetest creature you've ever met.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good point to make, because I think that's the one thing that he has developed in a lot of his later books that is not really present in this book. The villain in this book, which is basically just a mad scientist caricature, is just pure evil. Like, you don't know anything about him. He's just a bad guy who wants to take over the world, as generic as that is.
Yeah, he sold his soul to the devil, has a literal demon's hand grafted to himself. Mm-hmm. An anomaly in this book that doesn't exist in the others is this guy is just a bad guy.
Yeah,
and no one else is a bad guy. Everyone else may have difficulty relating to each other, but it's Mayberry. Everybody's a good guy.
Yeah.
Something that we mentioned, there's a character in here who Dr. Ong is fascinated by. He's from the area. He's a farmer. He's lived as a farmer his whole life, but through his own edification and his own pluck, he took some correspondence courses and got himself a PhD through the mail and being a physicist. And he's one of the brightest people that he knows.
Yes.
And something that I mentioned to you last night is I've lived in North Carolina my whole life, and it's a strange place because it's where I live right now is a major tech center of the country. But similarly, if I travel the same distance in the other direction, I'm in farmland where people have never really left their farm. And this guy who becomes a PhD level physicist on his own, that kind of thing is not common, but not uncommon. Someone that you would think is a hayseed without a thought in their head, and come to find out that they are an authority on Nietzsche. That character I thought was brilliant, and I'm glad he was there because it's a tiny dose of reality.
That character of Jim was one of my favorite characters in the book because there is that sort of plays to this conflict of the character of Michael, Dr. Ong. He leaves the small town, like the hick town, and goes off to like, essentially you could say he goes off to the secular world, to the big city, and he becomes like a huge star. I mean, there's straight up where he's doing his like he's kind of giving his little like autobiography of himself. And he's like, at 19, he became the youngest winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. And he lived in Los Angeles, and he pursued money and fame. And like, there's those panels of him like just kind of hanging around with like a naked woman in the bed, and he's just kind of got this like discontent stare, like
he traded one version of ignorance for another, is I think kind of the theme behind the guy.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much the prodigal son, like going into your Christian themes. Like, Michael is the prodigal son. Like, he leaves because he thinks he's going to find happiness somewhere else, and then he gets forced back to Turlock, and he's unhappy, and he's still unhappy. Like, he's always unhappy.
Yeah.
Yep.
But we were talking about the character of Jim, and I really like the character of Jim because Michael represents that. It almost becomes a stereotype, but I guess as somebody who also kind of lives, like, I don't live on either of the coasts. I live in the Midwest, as does Ed. There is that sense of like this like division of the intelligent people over in the enlightened cities, and then all of the rural idiots in the Midwest and the South. Yeah. And that can be played to various stereotypes, like I say. And I think there are a lot of people that don't really
like Larry the Cable Guy.
Exactly. Like, there's very much a sense of
made that comedian a very rich man, so I don't think he minds.
And that guy.
That's not even him really. That's a character.
It's a character. I know.
Oh, I know. I know. That's what makes me love him so much.
I know. It's ridiculous. What a great way to like make money at something. Like, he's not even funny, but he figured out a way to make money at it. Good on him, I guess.
What happens is, like, the character he's portraying is a real guy. Like, I've seen that real guy.
Oh, for sure.
My whole life.
I'm related.
So it's not even.
I'm related to those kind of guys.
It's not even that it's not necessarily that the joke is funny. It's that he's so spot on.
Familiar.
Yes, exactly.
It's familiar.
Like, familiar to just the weirdest degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just like, that is exactly my cousin.
Mm-hmm.
That is exactly my brother-in-law.
Yes, exactly. But this character of Jim, the townie who got the mail like correspondence course to become like a genius physicist, he's also like I think he feels like a very real character. Like, I know guys like this guy Jim who are like really smart, but they're not they're not big city guys. Like, they like living out in the country, and they get things.
It reminds me of the mechanic on Eureka.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Eureka, that's a good example. Like, we were talking, Gabe, about TV shows that CreatureTech kind of reminds me of. This whole setup of them like having this like government building full of warehouse or full of crates, of artifacts. And we talked. It's similar to the Sci-Fi Channel show Warehouse 13, which was an old one, but it also does remind me of Eureka.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something about that character. This might just be my own personal biases, but he strikes me as kind of a human ideal. He's certainly the Jeffersonian ideal American.
Oh, absolutely. Like a self-sustaining genius farmer. That's what Jefferson thought everybody in the future was going to be.
Yeah. Now, I don't think that specifically is the ideal, but it's the ideal of somebody who cultivates themselves and knows themselves completely and knows what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is a guy who is completely at peace with the surroundings. And you find the pockets of these people in every society. You'll find them in the major metropolitan areas. You'll find them living alone, the life of a hermit. Just, it's someone who is completely themselves and somebody who is also not afraid to cultivate themselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, and the problem is that character is fundamentally boring.
Right.
We see that character briefly to be the ultimate foil of our main character.
Yeah.
Because it's like, here's somebody who actually likes himself, knows himself and likes himself, and is like you in one way. And our main character doesn't really know himself and certainly does not like himself.
Correct. Yeah, there's like a perpetual unhappiness with Michael, like throughout the whole book.
Yeah, he's trying well, I go to church every Sunday, well, almost every Sunday, and they always talk about that one hole in your heart that you try to fill with other stuff, with material objects, and if I just, or the old saying is like, well, if I just got this, I'd be happy, or if I just had this one thing, I'd be happy, and it's not going to ever happen, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And, I know exactly what you're talking about. That's kind of in every life philosophy. It's like, here's how you actually become happy. Like that's the tenet of Buddhism. Is just you're never going to be happy if that's your attitude. It will never happen.
Right.
Exactly.
There's always the next.
There's
thing.
always more wants. You have to detach yourself from all wants and desires. That's the Buddhist philosophy for sure.
I think also I like the fact that Al and Ed, the two redneck guys, accepted Blue like that.
Instantly,
I mean, it was
instantly.
It was no, oh my gosh, and they just accepted him and made him one of their own, which I absolutely loved.
Mm-hmm.
Me too.
Yeah, this book definitely is not like it's set up so that Michael is the outsider among all the rednecks, and Michael is going. This is a book that is definitely sort of like on the redneck side, as it were. Michael is the outsider, and Michael's the one that's unhappy, and all of these rural people, they're like the two rednecks that accept Blue. Like, they're not the smartest people. Like, there are jokes about how they're kind of dumb, but ultimately they're like comfortable with themselves and they're happy. They have a contentment in life that Michael doesn't have.
Exactly.
It's possible to achieve enlightenment without achieving the high IQ.
Yes, exactly. And those characters are like, all the stuff with them and Blue are great. Of like that, like they're just taking Blue hunting, and like they get him like dressed up in like a hunting vest and boots, and
that is because when you have a giant mantis alien monster thing, the first thing you want to do is dress him.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just obvious. Come on.
Give him a shotgun.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a creature, very tall, doesn't speak, and has one working hand. Give him a shotgun. Why wasn't he born with one? Come on.
Right. So, talking about as we've been talking a lot about the recurring Christian themes in this, we briefly mentioned, I think, the strong Christian theme of Father and Son, which is certainly what Christianity is about. God the Father, God the Son, Jesus Christ, and whatnot. And go ahead, Gabe.
Ironically, I think that's the one aspect of this book that's not supposed to be entirely Christian based.
Well,
I think that just in terms of the writer, he just really appreciates and understands that relationship because of like Doug TenNaple, his own father is somebody that now as a middle-aged man with his own family is somebody that he understands and respects a great deal, but spent so much of his youth up until his 30s actively hating. And so I think
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, to draw the parallel, I think is that makes sense. But honestly, I don't think that's actually the patently Christian thing in the book. I think that's one of the only things that's just this is his personality.
Well,
because that shows up in all of his books. It's just he understands that relationship on a deep level.
I would go so far as to say, and this may be a different debate, but I would go so far as to say that is just that is such a deeply ingrained theme in human consciousness Now, whether or not you think that that is such a deeply ingrained theme of human consciousness, that is why it is such a Christian concept, the concept of father and son, or vice versa, if you think that it's a human concept, like it's a social concept because of Christianity, or the other way around, I think that the theme of like father and son or father versus son, that's definitely like a main aspect of Christianity. The whole, like, Jesus Christ tried to, before he was sacrificed on the cross, like, he prayed. He like tried to find another way. He did not want to do what God was telling him to do, but ultimately he just succumbed to God's will and went with it and did what had to be done. And that ties into the whole, like, what a Christ-like figure does. But of sacrifice and submitting yourself to a higher power. But there was a sense of rebellion and a sense of agony over having to do something that you didn't necessarily want to do. And I think that it was it Mark Twain that said all American literature is about fathers? Something to that effect. I think that's a quote by that's a quote by somebody similar, something about that. And I think that is you can look a lot of literature. You could say that it is about fathers and sons, and I think that just comes from the. You could also say that it just comes from the natural, just like the natural, like I don't want to say evolution of humanity, but I should say the natural state of humanity, of generations and generational conflict, and that story can be distilled. Everything about like conflict of humanity and passing on of knowledge can be distilled into the relationship of a father and a son.
Yeah, now, I don't usually like to be this guy, but completely ignores half of the population.
I know, and I was just about to go down that road of like, does that sound too patriarchal? As somebody who doesn't, I'm not even going to get into that argument. I think in this sense, when I'm saying father and son, you could basically just say, parent and offspring. That's really what it comes down to. And the reason it ends up being fathers and sons is you could just say because the majority of all literature has been written by men. And that is like an entirely different discussion on why that is. I'm not even going to talk about why that is. I'm just going to say that it is. Like, statistically speaking, we're just at a point where we're saying that the majority of fiction is written by men, and that's why it ends up being stated in the sense of father versus son. But yes, I think that ultimately it could come down to parent and offspring.
Yeah, I can see that argument, but I disagree.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that the concept is just, this writer particularly, like in my own books, the relationships that I make my stuff about is the relationships between male friends and relationships between brothers.
Mm-hmm.
I understand those relationships deeply and intimately, mostly because I have lots of brothers,
Mm-hmm.
but also because I've felt it's the relationship that I wanted to cultivate the most and had the most problems cultivating for lots of reasons. Like, even as a young child, I made friends with girls so much easier. Mm-hmm. And that led to a lot of social problems growing up. It also led to me falling in love and marrying much sooner than everybody else. So, it all balances out. Yeah. And so, like, because that's the relationship dynamic that it's specific, like friendships in the culture that we live in, friendships between two males and between brothers is different between friendship between male-female and female-to-female, mm-hmm. and the relationship between sisters. So I think that this guy is just, he because his own dealings with his father have been contentious and something that he's worked on as a lifelong pursuit. I think that it's very, very specific to just, like, I am the writer and this is my emotional landscape. This is my personal emotional landscape. That's why it's about this personal emotional thing. Mm-hmm. As opposed to being, like, I think it is the one part of his stories that is not allegorical and that is not pointing to higher overarching morality. I think it's the one little corner of of personal intimacy that he's giving us.
Yeah, I can see that.
What do you think, Ed?
Sure. You guys are using too many big words.
Well, you know, talking about the father-son aspect, particularly of this book, you have, as I think we mentioned earlier, but like the specific situation is that the character of Dr. Michael Ong, his father is a pastor, and his father used to be a scientist who then went to the seminary and became a pastor. And then when Michael was young, he went to the seminary to be a pastor and follow in his father's footsteps. And then I guess you could say, it's not really implied, but you could say that he had a sort of a crisis of faith and left the seminary to pursue science. And that's one of the main conflicts of the book, is the like you mentioned earlier, Gabe, the science versus faith, and that's sort of a red herring for what the book is about.
Yeah.
But
I
was just going to say, we were talking sort of like personal connections to this book, and I don't usually like to do this. I don't like to talk about like too personally about like me and like so on and so forth. But one of the things I think I did connect about this book, friends will obviously know this, but anybody who's listening to this podcast, one of the things that I connected with in this book is that I do actually have, my father is a pastor. And
oh wow,
yes,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I'm sorry to hear that.
Let me tell you, somebody whose dad is a pastor, the subject of whether or not you're going to church enough comes up a lot in all discussions. So I definitely related to the character of Dr. Michael Ong in this father-son conflict, like on a personal level. Like I totally got it, and so that is definitely something that one of the reasons why I think we were talking earlier, like about CreatureTech and how it sort of represents everything that TenNapel does. It is also one of the reasons that it sort of has like a special connection to me. That, you know, it just like it like felt like a book of like where somebody was like talking directly to me.
That's kind of funny because, you know, me being a 7-foot man-tid living with two rednecks, I kind of connected with.
I never knew that about you, Ed. I never noticed.
It's funny that you brought that up, Ed, because I'm sitting here thinking, I wonder what this guy looks like, and you know what? It just snapped into
now
focus.
You know, it makes total sense. But we were talking about the father-son relationship and the science versus religion red herring, because that's one of the main conflicts. Is that Dr. Ong, the character of Michael, he has to go through all of these scientific oddities or various artifacts that the government collects and analyze them and decide whether or not they are real or they have any sort of purpose, or, you know, if they're just
like a very, very boring version of the BPR.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, it's not a job that he likes. What was that, Ed?
I said that's what I was going to mention earlier. As like it's the BPRD.
Yes, exactly. And it's supposed to be sort of like a crap job. Like he kind of gets like shoved into this. But so like one of the recurring things is that, you know, now that he's back in his hometown, because that's where the institute is, he's having all this like crisis and conflict about like his job and things going on, like with the Shroud of Turrin, but he doesn't want to get his dad involved because Michael is a scientist, and he doesn't want to have to like listen to his dad bring religion into it. He just wants to look at it from a scientific point of view.
Well, he also wants to be his own man.
Yes,
too.
there is definitely
that's the religion in so much of our society, particularly this book, is a red herring.
Yes.
He doesn't actually want to avoid godly conversation. What he wants to avoid is his father in general.
Exactly.
He wants to be his own man as much as he can.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is sort of what we were talking about, like how this book can relate to like a general audience outside of just somebody who's looking for Christian material. And I think that's really like that's a good example of how it works. It's not really about like religion versus science. It's not about the scientists not wanting to get religion involved. It's about a dude not wanting to be under the shadow of his father.
Yeah. Now,
exactly.
like one of the conceit of the book is the Shroud of Turrin is here and it's real.
Yes.
The veracity of the Christian story is not in question. It can't be. There was a guy, his name was Jesus, here's his shroud, and look, it's actually magical.
Yes, and it works. Like that's the fact of the story, is that it heals people. Like, it has quote unquote magic or healing, abilities.
The actual rebellion, the thing that's going on is the whole point of particularly the monotheist religions is that there is good and bad. They exist independently of human perception, and virtue is worth pursuing self-evidently, the way that it's self-evident that all men and women are created equal. It's just a thing. And that is very specifically the rebellion. That is what he rejects, the concept of virtue and the idea that virtue should be pursued. He doesn't believe either of those things. And that is the rebellion. That is the part of his father that he rejects, is the simple concept of virtue and its pursuit.
Yes. Because that's... exactly. That's the... I really like that scene where he finally gives in and, like, brings his father into it. And he's explaining to his dad that he's like, we found the Shroud of Turrin, and it's real. And his dad just sort of has this, like, blank reaction where he's like, interesting. And Michael is like, why aren't you excited? This proves everything that you believe in, And the dad is, like, disappointed, and then he's like, you don't get it. Like, it's not about like having proof. Like, what does he say? He's like, you've seen the other side. Like, you don't have to have faith. You don't have to believe in it. You don't believe in it, even though you know it, but you don't believe in it. But yeah, I really like that scene, because that really kind of, like, spells out the concept of faith, like faith and science. Like, you can still study science and have faith, because it's about how science and faith are interwoven with each other. It's not about how they're at odds with each other.
Exactly. It's like, just the concept of one versus the other is a complete red herring.
Yes.
So, yeah.
All right.
See, this is why I'm an artist, not the writer. I couldn't. Oh yeah, it's like you guys are just delving into this so deeply, and I'm like, if I was a writer, I'd just basically you'd have 100 pages of fight scenes. That's why I had to work with her, so I can get the deep mind there to write for me.
I've literally read that book. 100. It's just 100 pages of action sequence. It's called Hysteria, and it's one of the most badass bits of comic I've ever read in my life.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Amazing. Please look it up. Hey, I tell you what, Ed, I'm glad you brought up art, because we've picked this thematically. We've picked this thing to death, and I want to get into some nuts and bolts of comic making, specifically art. I
agree.
So let's do that.
Let's start talking about the art, because we need to give Ed a chance to start talking. Because I tell you what, my voice hurts. I am tired.
My name is Aaron, and I am whining about things.
Oh boy, yeah, that's why I'm not married.
I went to church.
So let's talk about art. I think Doug TenNaple has a very unique style.
I love his style.
What do you love about his style, Ed?
It doesn't look like a big two house style. It's not all bubble muscles and all that shit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And the thing is, I was reading in here is he didn't know how to draw people when he did this. He was taking figure drawing classes as he was writing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which to me is amazing. But I was looking at this and I was like, I wish I would have read this back in 2002, and I would have been so afraid to do a comic, because, I mean, the storytelling is beautiful and the pacing's awesome, but sometimes I'm looking at the backgrounds, I'm like, the background's kind of weak, or the line work is a little bit weak, but I'm like, it still gets its point across, and it's just the way he draws stuff and his facial expressions is just so beautiful, and he gives me confidence, just the way he draws everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very approachable. It's strangely, it's good draftsmanship. Right next to kind of... No, hold on. It's good composition and good storytelling with mediocre draftsmanship.
Okay.
If that's a thing. Later on, his style progressed in very, very subtle ways, because I'm looking at Cardboard, which was made more than 10 years after, and it's still very clearly a TenNapel book, but his lines are so much more sure. Like, y'all read Ratfist,
Yes.
right?
I did.
I read the first half of it when I.
Okay.
I think I don't remember how we were talking about this the other day. Radfist was online, and then it wasn't online because it got put out by Image.
Yeah, he was doing it just the traditional webcomic route, and then Image decided that they would publish it. So as soon as it was
Image took down.
As soon as it was finished, it stayed up for a while. Excuse me. And then he took down the last, I don't know, 2/3 of it or so. And so it says, this is an Image book. You can read this preview and then buy it somewhere else. And now it's just here. You can buy it on Amazon or on on Comixology.
I'm not a good webcomic reader, and so like I read things in like big spurts, you know. And I read maybe 40 or 60 pages of it, and then I went back one day and I was like, I need to go finish reading Ratfist, and it was not there. I was very disappointed.
Yeah,
which I
saw it in stores, but I did not have the
yeah.
cash.
I mean, I don't blame him for it. You know, I totally get like, you know, I get it. I totally get it, but like that's why I haven't finished it. I will get around to getting the rest of his books eventually. As I said at the beginning of the podcast, I had to stop just buying comics almost completely exclusively. God, my comic book shop guy must hate me now. I used to buy a lot of comics, and I do not anymore.
Yes, he's listening to this podcast right now, polishing his rifle.
Boy, I hope not.
Shaking his fist at you.
Boy.
Tell you what, man, having a daughter helps out a whole lot. Because I am in that comic shop almost every week, and we're walking out with My Little Pony hot dogs.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Can't say no to those big teary eyes. I'm talking about your big teary eyes. She can't say no. Yes, we'll go to the comic book shop. Whatever. Just shut up, Dad.
Daddy, do we have to buy My Little Pony again?
And you'll like it.
There'll be no supper for you.
but yes, we were talking. Yeah, we have read Ratfist.
Art Ratfist was done hastily. The idea is that it's done with haste so that it maintains energy and interest without looking sloppy. And I think that's kind of the ethos behind almost all of his art, with the exception of a book that he hasn't released yet. All of his art kind of follows that guideline, but Ratfist pushed the sloppy line as hard as it could.
Yeah, didn't he he was I'm not saying bragging isn't like a negative, but he was doing like 4 pages a day or something like that, wasn't he? On Ratfist, he would inking like 4 pages a day.
Well, I know he was.
Okay, now inking 4 pages a day is not that big a deal if you're a full-time artist and the comic is all you have to work on. And inking Ratfist 4 pages a day does not take any time at all. Like I think that's the thing about TenNapel. There's a reason he can pump out a book a year, and it's because when it comes to finer details, he doesn't necessarily do them, and I don't think his art suffers for it.
Right, he settled into like a nice style like that, like perfectly balances the need for speed, as it were, and clarity of. Yeah, exactly. It's an economic style, but it still has that.
Speaking of economy,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, like let me draw a weird parallel. The difference between rich people and poor people is rich people know exactly what they want to spend their money on, and they'll spend their money on that thing, and everything else they won't. And just that's how you accumulate more wealth. Is just I only spend the money on the things I absolutely have to have, and then shun everything else. And TenNapel treats his books that way. Like, if you'll notice, there's a B plot that's really missing. The whole romance story between our main character and the girl he knew from high school. I'm such a shithead for not remembering names. right now. What was her name?
Flipping through the book right now. I can't. There's a page.
Milk Eye.
Milk Eye.
Yeah.
Katie. Her name is Katie.
Damn. Her name is Katie. We get one page where it's like, here's Katie, and then one line where it's like, I was shitty to her in high school, and she had a suicide attempt. Mm-hmm. And, like, there's nothing else there. And, like, also going back to, barely any of the villains are evil. That means this guy was our main character was a villain to this girl.
Yes.
And just throwing that out there. Anyway, that love story is barely touched. And I think that the book is the lesser for it. Think like Tommysaurus Rex. Mm-hmm. There is an essential B plot that's just not there. The main bad guy in Tommysaurus Rex is the main hero is a boy, and the villain is another boy his age who is essentially his bully. And we find out that he's a bully. He's lashing out because his dad skipped town, and towards the end, his dad comes back. The mom and the dad reconcile, and everything's hunky dory. Yeah. That is literally all the information we're given.
Bullshit.
Is missing. And I think it's just the reason TenNapel can clear a book in a year is because that B story is not what I'm here to tell. I'm going to tell the main thrust of my A story, and that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting your point now. Yeah.
I have. I've always kind of.
The real question is, I think that makes this book slightly poorer. What do you think?
Well, I was going to say, I have, like I said, I think I've gotten this impression from reading, like I say, about half dozen books. I kind of get the impression that these Doug TenNaple's books almost follow like a stream of consciousness style. I doubt. And I mean, I might be wrong. I'm not saying definitively either way, but just as a reader judging the book and really trying to get into TenNaple's head just based off of the book that I'm reading, I get the impression that there might not be a whole lot of long-term plotting for his books, and he is sort of just like he's got an idea for the story, like he knows how he knows the ending, he kind of knows where his A plot is going, but as he's drawing the book, he's sort of making up his mind of, like, I like this character, so I want to do something with this. I'm not really feeling this, so I'm just going to kind of leave this by the wayside. I get the impression that a lot of his books sort of feel like that. Like they're almost like they're being written as they're being drawn. Yeah.
I know that he plots ahead of time.
Yeah, and I don't mean to imply that he doesn't plot ahead of time. That's just like I said, like stylistically, that's the impression I get from the way the story is told. Like it feels like things sort of like get picked up and dropped off intermittently, depending on like where he's at in the story. Well, because if you notice, that, like. Yeah. It's definitely prevalent in CreatureTech, and I noticed it in some of his other books. But he'll have a tendency to just kind of like go off on like one-page jokes. Like the whole plot will kind of just like stop for a second while we just kind of do a bit about like a
pretty much every time the mantis alien is
there. Like that's one of them. But I mean, you can even get even more like it's even more like. I don't want to say pointless because I mean if it's funny then it's not pointless because it's entertaining. But like there's the scene where the bad guy has the Shroud of Turrin and he's got his giant Hellcat and he goes to the butcher and he's like, I need all your meat, and he gives him a bunch of gold, and the butcher like the bad guy accidentally leaves the Shroud of Turrin on the counter, like because he's an idiot, I guess, and the butcher like hangs it up on like a hook where there's all these like sides of beef hanging, and all the meat comes alive and forms itself into like a little meat man. And like it's just like a 2-page sequence of like it's just a joke. It's just a joke of the meat man being like, oh, I'm alive. I have consciousness. This is amazing. I'm gonna go out into the world and find myself. And then he just immediately gets run over by a truck. And the bad guy's watching it, and he just says a pun. He just goes, oh, looks like he's gone to meet his maker. And it's like, I'm not, whether or not you think that's funny, whatever. I'm not even debating about, like, whether or not that joke is good or bad. That was a complete...
Because the joke is clearly good.
The joke is clearly good. All puns are good. But it was a complete detour, like, just like a complete, like, full stop. Like, it had nothing to do with the story at all, the little meat man, like, joke. But it was just there. And I see, like, I definitely saw a lot of that in Rat Fist. Rat Fist had a lot of sort of like diversions from whatever the plot was, and it's not all of his books are like that, but I noticed that like there's a few instances of stuff like that in this book where they're just kind of like little tangents. Like he'll just go off on a little tangent for a page or two, get a little joke in, and it's
like an
intermission. Yeah, and it starts to feel that's where the book feels almost like a comic strip instead of a comic book. And that's why I say it feels like it's being written as he goes along, because like he's got his plot and he's writing and he kind of like gets to this character and he's like, oh, I like this, I'm just going to kind of do this for a few pages, and then we go back to our plot.
All right, now here's the question. Like we've got books like Box Office Poison. We've got books like I Fight Giants.
I Kill
what's
Giants,
the other one?
yes.
Blankets.
Oh, Blankets.
Yeah, I Kill Giants. Excuse me. Blankets. All of these tell almost complete stories where no B or C plot is left
Correct.
out. And here we've got TenNapel, who leaves everything out. If it's not the main thrust of the story, then it's cut away. And where Blankets took 5 years, CreatureTech took 1.
Right.
Is it an even trade-off? Is this book superior, or is his book lesser?
I don't think I can make any sort of like quality judgment call about that. I think it just comes down to preference.
Well, good news, because I was actually asking Ed.
Dang! Shut down! All right, I'll shut up. Ed, go on.
For the record, I was joking. I do want to hear everything Ed has to say, but, I expected you to weigh in.
Weigh in with my negative cynicism. I'm sorry, my bitter negative cynicism.
I don't know. You guys ever seen a TV show called Touch? It had Kiefer Sutherland, and he had a little boy that had autism.
I've seen Touched by an Angel. Is that...
Whoa.
That sounds horrible.
I did. Is that a Bill Cosby comic?
Oh, that one stings a little. Okay, no, I have not seen the show.
You should.
Anyway, it's almost like, you guys ever seen the old TV show Early Edition where the guy got Tomorrow's Newspaper Today and stuff?
No.
Anyway, okay.
I remember the concept.
Yeah, right.
Well, I like the book, and I think the artwork and everything's good, but I really wish it would have made it even stronger if he would have developed because stories are about relationships, and if he would have developed the relationship more between Dr. Michael Ong and Katie more, and then wrapped it up at the end for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
and,
I am unsatisfied.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just like, "Where's my happy ending?" It ended well, but I want the happy ending. I want to see the wedding chapel and the little flowers or butterflies or whatever. I want to make sure. I don't want no questions that he ended up with her.
Yeah.
Don't make me
romance story that I'm actually interested in.
Right.
Well, and that kind of is the thing. Is like this isn't really a story about Michael's relationship with other characters. It's really about his relationship with himself
and his father.
Well,
because
his relationship with his father, but it's still more or less about like how he, like it's still like him struggling with his faith. Like that's ultimately what it's about.
It is, but in the story, he reconciles with himself. He reconciles with his father. Mm-hmm. And then he really just kind of half-asses it with that chick in the story. I mean, he throws.
But the reconciliation is there. It's just weak, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and on top of that, like, just that's the real question. It's the romance story. There is not the main thrust of what he's trying to tell us. Therefore, it was cut.
Yeah.
Does that make the whole thing lesser, or does the focus make it more? How do I put this? If it was there, it would be a more complete story, but because it's not there, it's a more focused story. So which is better, focus or comprehension?
Right. Well, I can definitely say I think I would have definitely appreciated if CreatureTech was a bigger work of art that had more to say other than just Michael's crisis of faith and relationship with his father. I think that would give it more a wider appeal, like because I think more people can relate to like the different relationship problems as opposed to specifically Michael's problems with faith and science. But at the same time, I get that that's what TenNapel wanted to write about. Like that's the theme, you know.
Yeah. Ed, what do you think? Is it better or worse for having left it out?
I don't know. It's hard to say because I mean, I kind of like he did. I mean, I guess just me. I want closure.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know because in the end, you don't have. There's no blatant. I want to know exactly. I don't want to have to guess if he got together with that chick or not. I want to know.
Ugh.
And it just has him with his cross around his neck, and he's in the woods in the last thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and I'd rather seen some sort of even it didn't have to be some cheesy or kitschy, you know, we got together. Maybe some sort of artistic way to show that they got together or something, you know. And it for the closure, because to wrap up all the stories that are in there,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of making one of my books right now. Let me back up. I have been making the same book for the past 2 years, and if my count is correct, I'm going to be making the same book for the next 3 years minimum. So I'm sitting here, and I'm doing it box office Poison style. Every character is completely realized. Every relationship is gone into in great detail. It's very decompressed storytelling. And I'm sitting here reading Doug TenNaple's books, and I'm just reading. It's like, wow, this is nice. Oh, this is a good book. Oh, I like this story. Doug TenNaple's a fucking cheater.
Well, you know, and I guess
doing it in 1 year, cutting out these story bits.
it kind of goes down to like what the goal is. Like you brought up blankets. Blankets is a challenge. I like blankets, but like you give the average person blankets, they're gonna see the size of it and they're just gonna be like, I don't know. But you know, I do think that there's a like with like CreatureTech, there's it's like slimmed down to like the precision of what TenNapel wants to say. Like his message is clear. And the point is, like, these other side relationships aren't really necessary to the message. And I think that tied into, as I said earlier, how I feel like there's sort of like almost a stream of consciousness to his, like, the style of the book, a stream of consciousness writing. Mm-hmm. I think that kind of plays into, like, just the general style, the overall voice of Doug TenNaple's voice, which almost gives the story he tells almost has, like, a surreal quality to it. Like, it's not really about the characters. Yeah. It's almost dreamlike in that it's not really about the characters. It's just really about the honestly, it's about the themes or like the message that he's trying to get across. Across. So I don't know why I said that with a T on there. That made me sound like an idiot.
That's not what makes you sound like an idiot.
It's everything else I say.
It's when you say that the life of Brian was.
Oh man.
Say it was a good concept, I would agree with you. You say it was a valiant effort, I'd agree with that too. You say it's actually legitimately funny, and I'm thinking that you're the one who's funny, but not in the way you want to be.
Oh, Gabe, you are going down a dark path, my friend.
I'm not going down the dark path. I know what is funny. My path is bright and colorful.
Oh, brother. To reiterate my point, I'm not going down that road with you, Gabe. We're leaving that one. I do think that Doug TenNaple has a very strong voice in the books, like the complete package that he puts together. And as I said, I do think that it's not really about the character relationships. It's more about the message, the philosophy, or the themes that he's trying to get across to you. And that gives it almost like a surreal quality. You know, in some sense, because there is a lot of his stories, there's a lot of ambiguity going on, because there is a lot of, again, going with that main theme of humility, there is a lot of, like, we can never know everything. I think that's one of the themes of a lot of TenNaple's books, and that you have to just accept the fact that you can't know everything. So I guess that sort of, I guess what I'm saying is that sort of ties in with his whole like not following through on a lot of relationships. Maybe not intentionally, but I do think it fits in.
Yeah.
We kind of like strayed off the subject of the art. There was one other thing that I wanted to say that I really like about TenNaple's style. First of all, I specifically love his stark black and white inks.
Yes.
I mean, like, I appreciate a good, like, like most black and white books, especially if you read, like, any manga or slash manga, Japanese comics, you're very familiar with gray tones and how there's variation across the page of, like, black, white, gray, and everything, shades in between. TenNaple's books do not have that. It is just flat black and white. And I think that kind of ties into what you were talking about earlier, Gabe, about like the economy of his art, and it sort of gives it the effect that you are just looking at this dude's sketchbook. Like he's like the weird kid in school, like who sat in the back and just drew in a sketchbook, and you just like flip through it, and like it's like TenNaple just drew a whole comic book in his sketchbook.
I have to disagree.
Oh, you have to disagree. Oh my God! All right,
Bring it
lay
on.
it on me, boy.
It's very sophisticated. I think his art is very sophisticated, and I mean, I'm not a big fan of American comics because of the spotted blacks, but I love Doug's spotted blacks for some reason.
I can see that totally.
And maybe it's because of the use of his negative space.
Yes,
because he has a few of where he has a chair in here that just has like. Just enough information to let you know that's a swivel chair back there in the next room behind him, and
his compositions are spot on.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, yes, it's awesome. This is one of the books. I mean, I look up to Doug TenNaple just because of his art alone.
Truth.
And I like the fact that it's not. I mean. It's just the storytelling and, like I said, the pacing. There's one page in here that's double pages that has just a bunch of. Oh, which one was it? I don't even. There's no page numbers on there, but it has like what's it 6, 7? It has 7 on one and 8 on the other of different panels of him fighting the Hellcat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it was just the pacing on it is just amazing. I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that like his art is like sketchy or unfinished. That isn't what I meant. Like it's very complete. Like
it's a little more loosey goosey, a little more high energy, low polish.
Painterly.
It is very painterly. What I meant to imply was that it feels like there's not a lot of after like production on top of the pages. Like there's not a lot of like extra polish, where they go in and fix some things. I assume the lettering is all done digitally. I think that's stated in the critics.
The letters are digital. However, the balloons are by hand.
That's what I was wondering because the balloons feel very natural to the page.
Even the sound effects, because some of the sound effects look hand
drawn. The sound effects are by hand. Okay. It's only the dialogue.
Yeah, like the dialogue exactly. Awesome. See, because I was gonna say like it's things like that's a great example of what you mentioned, Gabe. The sound effects, like the sound effects are all a part of the art. It's all a part of the page. Like it feels like nearly everything that you're reading on this page is exactly how it looks when he's done drawing it.
Right.
And that's what I like so much about it.
And I would say he's a true cartoonist.
Yes.
Because he just he conveys the information with the least amount of strokes and just like the economy of line and whatnot, but he still tells you the story and all the information you didn't know in that panel, what's going on and what direction the story's going in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we've talked this thing to death. I think
we have. I think we've said about as much as we can. I think the only thing that I would say that we haven't said yet, one last thing, is that it's funny that you brought up. I assume that this is in the Image edition of the book when you were talking about he mentions that he was taking figure drawing classes while he was working on this because like one of the things that I think TenNaple draws very well is cats and monsters. And there are lots of cat monsters in this book. His first book that he did before this, Gear, is all about cats and giant robots, which is...
Oh, that was picked up for a cartoon.
That was on Nickelodeon. Cat Scratch. It bore very little resemblance to the comic itself, other than the characters. But I only watched... I haven't watched a lot of the cartoon, I have to admit, but I did catch like an episode because I was just like, oh, that's that thing. I love the book. I'll check this out, and it was neat, but you couldn't say it was an adaptation of the comic at all.
And to go back to the art real quick, is his body language and his facial expressions are fantastic, I think.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, that's true. His acting is very good.
Yes. Which you don't see a lot in comics. I'm so sick and tired of seeing a comic and there's a word balloon above someone's head and their mouth is closed.
Yeah. That's so much like
that drives me up the wall.
Just I don't know. Yeah, most like I guess that kind of comes also into like the economy of storytelling of like mainstream superhero comic artists having to just have like two faces for all their characters so they can crank out a page. You know, I don't know, but. TenNapel definitely, all of his characters have like a unique face. He has very unique expressions depending on the panel and what's going on. Like it all feels very alive.
Nothing to add. I'm completely spent.
Okay, I think we've all talked about how much we like this book and backwards and forwards. Thank you, Ed and Gabe, for doing this episode. I had a lot of fun talking about this book. I love Doug TenNaple. I will have to do another one of his books or something. We'll have to get both of you back on another episode because this was good. So thank you everybody for listening. I am Aaron Walther. You can find comics that I have written on my website, newhavencomics.com, and you can also see some of my other works at aaronwalther.com. You can find me on Facebook. I am Aaron Walther on Facebook. And you can find me on Twitter at AAWALTHER. That's at AAWalther on Twitter. And you can, of course, find new episodes of this very podcast, Comic DNA, at comicdna.podbean.com. We are also on iTunes, so feel free to search for us, Comic DNA on iTunes, and we should pop up. Ed.
I'm Ed Bickford. You can find me at www.edbickford.com or on Twitter, I am Edwin Bickford. And then also I am on Facebook as Ed Bickford as well, and I think Instagram. I don't remember. You'll just have to find me and be lucky.
Ed Bickford, the gypsy of Instagram.
Yes.
Gabe.
I am Gabriel Dunston. I'm currently getting my internet house in order, but you can find. When I update my Tumblr the most right now, so gabedunston.tumblr.com, GABEDUNSTON, and I will be making many, many little short quotes and comics about how Life of Brian is terrible and feeling Aaron's seed.
I'm just going to post nothing but Life of Brian gifs on your Tumblr.
Win-win.
On my closing, I was going to go, and you can find me at Aaron. You can find me as Aaron Walther on Twitter as well.
There are multiples of us. I'm not the only Aaron Walther. Nah. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening. Thanks Ed and Gabe for being on the show. It was a good show. If anybody who's enjoying this, come back to the next episode. I'm going to have. My good old friends John Parrish and Luke Thompson Moritz are going to be back. We're going to talk about the third book of Pipochu, wrapping up our series on the manga by Felipe Smith. So I'm pretty excited to kind of do the final episode on that. Final-ish, we'll see what happens. There's not any more books to talk about, but we like talking about Pipochu. But anyway, thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you all next time.